Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Now, I mentioned Cynthia McKinney, PhD, Dr. McKinney these days, is a former two-term Georgia congresswoman, wonderful woman, also ran for the presidency. She was the Green Party nominee previously as well. Can't say enough about her, really. I've known her a long time. Wonderful woman. She was from the round about mid-September, maybe early October. She was presenting a weekly show for the Pacifica Network's KPFK station, community radio, but with a good listenership and a big reach. So she was happy with that. She was doing it very well, and I did mention that to her, not to patronise her, but she was doing a fantastic job with it. Really good at Cynthia, really personable, got a real understanding of the intimacy of radio. Very, very good. Now, without warning, the show was dropped off the air earlier this week with no consultation. We were asking the question today on social media and yesterday, why was that? Was it something she said? Well, as I said, I got in touch with Cynthia a little bit earlier on, and the first thing I asked her was, why did she think that the programme she'd been presenting since the autumn of last year, why indeed did she think the programme had been dropped? And this is what she told me.
Well, I don't exactly, I don't know if now is a good time to talk or if we should talk later, when I hope to get an update on what the heck is going on. Because, of course, as you know, I am half a continent away, or maybe a whole continent away.
Yeah.
And so don't really understand what happened, except that Pacifica has always been beset by the fact that, I should say factionalism. And in fact, you could even look at it as a microcosm of what's happening in the U.S. in macrocosm. And that is, you've got in the U.S., you've got one deep state faction fighting another deep state faction. And I've likened it to the Hillary pro-war neocon globalist faction versus the Trump. I've likened them to, to call them the pilgrims, Make America Great Again faction. Catherine Austin Fitts calls it the Titanic Turners, who are the Trump Make America Great Again faction, versus the Piggies, who are the ones that became quite accustomed to being able to wield the U.S. Ship of state, as it were, any way that they wanted it, and became, little piggies, little greedy piggies. And so the way she puts it is that you've got the Titanic Turners who are saying, no, we're not going to sacrifice the United States. We're not going to destroy the U.S. in order to achieve all of these regime change goals and all of the wars and everything. And then you've got the Piggies, according to Catherine Austin Fitts, who say, well, we don't really care that much about the U.S. It's just a vehicle for us to get from where we are to where we're trying to go. Yeah. And if in the process of going where we need to go, the U.S. itself gets destroyed, we don't care about that. And basically, I agree with her in that characterization and have been trying to sound the alarm for a very long time. So with community radio, in particular Pacifica, you can imagine that this larger battle has always been playing out on a smaller scale with the Pacifica Network stations. And every station plus the Pacifica National Board, which is the Pacifica Radio Network, is Pacifica itself owns 5 radio stations across the United States, which is very expensive real estate right now. And so you've got the piggies that want to feed at the trough, and then you've got the community that's saying, wait a minute, this is supposed to be about us. This is supposed to be about community radio, and you're violating the very mission of Pacifica, of the entire network, by providing a trough for certain piggies that want to feed at it.
You know, I'm not a sycophant, Cynthia. I've always loved you doing radio. In fact, you can confirm for our listeners that I was in touch with you a few years ago to get you to do a television show from the States for us in London, because you're very good, and despite the fact you've got very strong opinions, which you do have, and you are subjective at times, overall you're very fair. How did they, and I do appreciate there's not much you can say at this stage, and it's going to, I suppose, unfold probably in the next few days and next week, but how did they communicate to you that they wanted to suspend the program? Do you think there was something specifically? Was there a program that you did recently where, you know, you're always on the cutting edge anyway, but was there something you think that might have triggered it? A specific show, a specific interview?
Well, no. I would just like to clarify that everyone is subjective.
Yeah,
and
me included.
So the issue is, how do you deal with your subjectivity in an effort to be objective about a set of circumstances that confront you? And so basically what I did a couple of shows ago is there's a false left-right paradigm that's being exploited by the pro-Hillary faction, the pro-Hillary, pro-war, neocon globalist faction. And so, well, actually, I shouldn't say that, because it's both sides that are promoting this faction.
Yes.
Of what is left and what is right, or what is not left. And so left for me, and I define myself on the left, and I define myself on the left by a set of principles. So I enunciated those principles on one of the shows and clarified that left for me means being pro-truth, being pro-justice, being pro-peace, being pro-dignity, pro-human dignity, pro-environmental dignity. And so that to me means being left. Now what they've tried to do is to confuse people and say, okay, being pro-war is being the left. And so a lot of people are extremely confused and are trying, well, they communicate with me, trying to figure out what the heck is going on, because they don't quite trust what they've been told, and they don't quite know who they are. So I thought that a good exercise would be for me to clarify what it is that I stand for: principles and policy instead of personalities. And if we, whether we are on the left or the right, if we agree on certain principles and policies, then we don't get caught up in the personality trap.
Absolutely.
Like, are you pro-Hillary or are you pro-Trump? No, I am pro-peace, I am pro-truth, I am pro-providing evidence and pro-information so that people can make up their own minds. Now, the latest show that I discussed was about Dr. Peter. Well, no, actually, I didn't. I did a show, and only later did I find out. I only found out a few hours ago that the show wasn't aired, and that show was an explication of a theory put forward by Dr. Peter Turchin called cliodynamics, something I've spoken about for a few years now, a very long time, that helps to explain why the U.S. military has become engaged in wiping whole countries off the map, if we want to use that parlance.
Yeah.
So I discussed cliodynamics, and I also discussed Seymour Hersh's Samson option, the book Samson option, because I think what we've got are two deep state factions duking it out with each other, and neither of which is going to say, I'm not going to use every tool that I have at my disposal to win, both of which have a history of being extremely violent, including committing genocide and committing crimes against humanity and human trafficking. So with that kind of understanding, I'm just trying to break it down so people can decide for themselves where it is that they want to fall in this big colossal clash of the titans, as it were, where they want to fall, and so that people don't fall for, or be bamboozled by the propaganda. So now, in terms of which show it was that offended them, probably all of them did.
Yeah.
Because I didn't, I am not a Hillary Clinton sycophant, but at the same time, neither am I going to be a Donald Trump sycophant, but I want people to be able to see through, or to be able to translate Washington, D.C. speak to their own lives.
That's brilliantly important. A number of great researchers have been on this program recently. Some of them, you know them quite well, people like Gilad Atzmon and others who've been talking about identity politics, gender politics, politics, identifying with a belief system of one kind or another. What you've always done, as long as I've known you anyway, is you've sought the truth, no matter who is stating their intentions to do A, B, or C. You've always gone after what they've said and sought the truth in that, and evidence in that. And of course, that's sadly that it's not sadly lacking in most of the media. It's gone really from most of the media. And on that, and look, I'm disappointed for you because you mentioned sycophant. I ain't a sycophant. I love what you do. One of the things we can talk about, maybe I'm cheeky in saying it now that we're recording this conversation, but we've got a massive audience over here. We don't brag about that, but it's massive. And one of the things we've looked at doing in the past, because I'm basically the only show in town on my own network, which broadcasts 24/7 to a large audience. We repeat our programs. If you wanted us to facilitate you in conversation with a number of the men and women whom have influenced you and that you think are interesting, we can facilitate that and make those programs and do that for you. And that's something we can do. And we talked about this a few years ago. We'll wait and see how things pan out. But if you ever need a platform and you want an audience, a ready-made audience, most, if not all of them, who know all about you and what you've done anyway, I'd be honoured to make that happen. But look, we can talk about that later on. One of the things I did want to talk. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Wait a minute, because I don't want to let that moment pass, because I have to credit you with me even contemplating, or me reaching the point where I actually am doing a radio program, because I want to put on the record, yes, you were the first one to reach out to me for that television show a long time ago.
That's right. Yeah.
And you know that I had a lot of disquiet about it because I didn't yet identify myself as a media person.
That's
and
right.
So,
yeah.
I just didn't. I didn't get that. But the more I thought about it, and then I got other requests, and so finally, the right request came at the right time, and so then I ended up on KPFK.
And I've been listening to it. Yeah. I've been listening to it, Cynthia, and it's terrific. Look, what I saw in you, and I came from a commercial, a national radio background, and I used to coach presenters for a couple of different organisations, City and Guilds being one, and FOS in the other. Somebody thought I was good enough to train presenters. There is an old adage that says doctors should first cure themselves. And maybe I'll have to look at that in the future. But yeah, I've coached. But what I saw and what I see in you is somebody, incredibly articulate, wonderfully intelligent, and with a lifetime of experience in DC, in politics, world experience, activism, running for president. I said, you can't, that's solid gold, that. And I would have always trusted you, and listening back to your programs recently, my trust wasn't misguided, to be fair and to be honest and to be objective within the paradigm of subjectivity. Because you're right, we all are subjective. The first time I ever interviewed you, we had a massive stonking row about something related to Israel or Gaza. But I remember being incredibly impressed later on with you putting that to one side. Right, those are the slings and arrows. We had a row, we had an argument, move on. And I saw in you, just incredible ability. And I was delighted that you started doing that program, which I think you began in September, October, November last year, and it was going terrifically well. So it's a huge shame that if it has come to an end, and maybe these people will come to their senses, but we'll definitely, and my word is gold, this program airs on davidike.com, it airs on Fab Radio in Manchester, Alternate Current Radio, and Tune In Radio to an enormous audience. And it's running 24/7.
Yes.
And we've been looking for ways to kick me and my repeats off the schedule and schedule some good stuff. And if that happens, you just got to say the word, and I'll facilitate the recording for you. I can do it all on my end. But look, our listeners are being left out. They're like, well, look, you guys can sort that out later on. While I have you, because you're incredibly busy, Dr. McKinney, let me ask you this. We spoke in the run-up to the election. We haven't spoken since Donald Trump won the election. What have you made of what's happened since then? And I'd like you to address a couple of issues, if you'd like. One of them being the travel ban, the other one being his welcoming of Benjamin Netanyahu to DC, and I suppose the other one being his relationship with the media. What do you think of what you've seen so far?
Oh, well, I think on the travel ban, let me just make a note of that. Travel ban, DC media.
And Israel.
And Israel. Okay. Yeah. So on the travel ban, I think it's very important for people to understand that the 7 countries, and not 7, but 8, because Elliot Abrams has just launched a tirade against Lebanon. And so, on the original 7 countries in 5 years Wesley Clark list, Lebanon was there. It got substituted by Yemen in the Trump travel ban. But I think we have to understand the genesis of the travel ban, these 7 countries, and what really is going on. And so, therefore, the travel ban was, let me just make it very clear that I think it was an unfortunate, how can I say, demonstration on the part of Trump, an unfortunate lack of understanding to do a refugee travel ban at the same time that you're bombing those same countries. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so on the one hand, there was a promise during the campaign, or a commitment, or at least there were words that were uttered about stopping and ending the regime change wars, and yet the regime change wars haven't stopped. And so, therefore, if you still have the military machine in process, it's destroying whole countries, then I think the travel ban was an unfortunate aspect of Trump policy. At the same time, the immigration process in the U.S. has been broken for a very long time. But the travel ban is not about the immigration process. And so we have to understand that this was something else. This travel ban was something else. And the appeal to radical Islamic terrorism, the foes of that phenomenon, I think also was extremely unfortunate and false, because everyone who has done at least even a little bit of research understands that there was no such thing as a radical Islamist until radical Islamists were created by U.S. finance, both of madrasas and of jihadis back in the late 1970s. And now the madrasas that the U.S. finances are throughout the world. Very few people realize that the United States also printed textbooks explaining Islam in these madrasas that created this interpretation of Islam. So the extent to which this radical Islamist is created by, financed by, produced by, maintained by the very powers that are decrying its existence is hypocrisy.
Yes. Does he know that,
I think
Cynthia?
that U.S. Policy is extremely hypocritical, and Donald Trump played on that and a kind of innate racism inside the United States that's never really been dealt with. And so now these people are the latest people to hate, with the poor, uninformed people in the United States not realizing that the Swiss bank accounts, the Scott Bennett story, the Brad Birkenfeld story, now we understand how these guys were financed and who they really are.
Brilliant stuff. You've answered the question I was going to ask about, does he understand it? On the media, let me summarise for you, because my listeners are tired of listening to me, but you won't have heard me talk about this. My position on Trump taking on the media in the way that he has done is this. Yes, the mainstream media is deplorable. It's owned effectively by a group of massive corporations, the same corporations who manufacture the weapons that are rained down on people in Yemen and elsewhere. It is dreadful. It is not a proper media. I accept that. But my opinion has always been, how dare any prime minister, any president, any head of state go after the media in that way? It's not their job to do that. It's our job to do it. It's their job to field questions from the media, no matter where they come from. Now, I'll shut up. That's what I've said on this media row. What have you made of it?
Well, quite frankly, the U.S. media is so corrupted and so propagandized that I really appreciate Trump going after them, because what it has done is has opened people's eyes to the lies in the media. Of course, you know, I've been affected by that lying media, and actually ended up losing my job because of that lying media. So I understand the tremendous power that the media have. Nowadays, I'm getting email messages and, Twitter and Facebook messages from people who are saying, I really thought you were racist and, I thought you were this and I thought you were that. And that was how the media characterized me in order to decrease the impact of the questions that I was asking about Washington, D.C. and things that were happening in D.C. So, I was talking 12 years ago about human trafficking. Do you think it's gotten better since 12 years ago? No, it's gotten worse. And so, but when I was touching those third and fourth and fifth and sixth rails, asking questions about 911 and the character of those that were put in positions of authority and leadership, I was just called crazy, loony, kooky, and people believed it. And I think that people believed a lot of it just because I was this black girl from the South that wasn't supposed to be asking these tough questions of these white males in authority that were looked up to by the general population. But my father taught me long ago that all of them, no matter who they are, put their pants on just like I do. And therefore, if I have a question that I need to get answered, I can ask that question of them. And so I did that in the Georgia legislature, and I did it in Congress, but it got me in trouble in Congress.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. It's a brilliant answer. Look, I appreciate that. And I've had Mike Rivero on this week. I had Paul Craig Roberts on, and we've been kind of banging our heads about it. They're in total agreement with you, by the way. You know, they say, look, these organisations have had it coming for years. And, you know, I'm just old school. Yes, they have. And I've never suffered at the hands of the media. I've never had to put up with what you had to put up with. I mean, your profile is massive. Everybody knows who you are. I've never had the media come after me. So I don't understand that. But I just worry about...
But you know what?
Yeah, go ahead, Cynthia.
One thing, WikiLeaks. I have to say thank you to WikiLeaks, even though it caused me a lot of grief when I was writing my dissertation because I had to remove every reference to WikiLeaks. I used WikiLeaks in my own dissertation and then had to remove everything. But were it not for the emails that were made public as a result of the WikiLeaks platform existing, we would never know the extent to which the so-called mainstream media had been corrupted and co-opted by the Clinton administration, or I should say, to broaden it because it's way bigger than that, the Hillary Clinton face of that faction of the U.S. deep state. I thank goodness for WikiLeaks every day.
And you're right, and when you mention that, again, it's an indictment of the media. The Clintons should be in prison for the rest of their lives. You know,
you're absolutely right about that.
And you know what, Cynthia? People might say, oh, Richie, you've got to maintain some level of objectivity as a presenter. Listen, the evidence is there. The Clinton Foundation alone, let alone what was going on in Arkansas, let alone what was going on while he was president, the Clinton Foundation alone is the biggest money laundering organisation on planet Earth. The mafia would be proud of it if they owned it. You're absolutely right to say that. And this is known in the corridors of power at CNN, at C-SPAN, even at Fox News, and yet they've never gone after them. You're absolutely right to say that. While we're on Trump, and I'm mindful of you rushing off to do other things, so I won't keep you too much longer. One of the things we're worried about is, while he said the right things about Syria, and while he said the right things about Russia, and I thought it was a powerful thing. Most of my listeners think that I'm just anti-Trump, anti-this. I'm not. I'm anti-politics in general. But I thought it was powerful when he said to O'Reilly on Fox News on Super Bowl Sunday, when he said basically, well, haven't we, you know, committed genocide and war crimes? Powerful stuff. I mean, whatever you think of Trump and his ideas and if he's real or if he's controlled or not, unbelievable for a president to be saying that on national television with an audience of hundreds of millions. But then, Cynthia, then I see him going after Russia via the back door, talking about tearing up the Iranian deal, you know, moving himself closer and closer to Netanyahu. Because I believe that going after Iran and making things very tense with Iran and maybe even going further than that is again going to introduce a situation where the tension between the United States and Russia and China is going to be at a critical level. So with Israel, what's going on with Trump that you've seen so far? What have you determined from what you've seen so far?
You know, there are some there's a community of Trump supporters who believe that Trump is waking and playing the game in order to unveil something that's a little bit more rational and more sane later on. But that's the same delusional thinking that I witnessed with the Obama supporters in 2009. So I don't go on winks and suppositions. I go on what people say and on what, and more importantly, on what they do. And that provides the evidence to me for making an assessment of whether or not they are moving in a direction that I can support, that's a principled direction, or if that's, something else that's going on. Or as the late, great Mike Rupert would say, if something is moving under the carpet, And so on Israel, Trump has never really been there on Israel-Palestine, but he did say something that caught my attention when he said that the two-state solution is becoming impossible.
Yeah.
Well, the two-state solution was made impossible by the Israelis and their settlement policy a long time ago. And and he also added that if it were two states, it might not be democratic or something like that. And so that is absolutely, I think, right on the money. Unfortunately, his own son-in-law is, sent money over there to support the settlements that the Trump administration came in saying, hey, wait a minute, hold off on the settlements. So I think that there's going to be a lot of double signals being given. There will be a lot of even duality, as you've got people who, quite frankly, are inexperienced at governance. And I absolutely am concerned about the Trump staff, the Trump cabinet. I have some concerns about the ethics or the lack of having had to deal with public accountability in the past. So one of the first things that the entire Trump family should have done was build a wall between the businesses and the policy to eliminate even the appearance of conflicts of interest. That has not even been done yet. This is huge because the inexperience of this staff in the area of governance is extremely clear and will be utilized by, we've got a former Mossad person saying, yeah, Trump is going to be impeached. Don't think for a minute that people aren't sitting back and plotting a way to Trump's impeachment. If Bill Clinton can be impeached for having sex with someone in the Oval Office who was a subordinate and not his wife, then certainly Trump, the bar has been lowered such that it will be very easy for folk to find who are looking to find impeachable offenses. So you've got a cabinet and a president that have been oriented toward closing the deal, making business deals without any kind of real public scrutiny. And now everything is going to be under scrutiny. So from the Secretary of Education to the Secretary of State to the Secretary of Commerce to the President himself. And then if you extend this to the staff, these are not people who understand what the heck they are in right now. This is not some place where you can make a business deal and move on to the next deal. This is governance. This is for the power play of the century. And so this is far bigger. The stakes are far bigger than any business deal. So with that having been said, the Flynn flap. Now, I was never a fan of General Flynn. But so he's there and he's central, according to what I've read, he's central to Trump's foreign policy. Okay, so you want to protect someone who's central to your the overall structure of your administration. You want to protect those people, but the lack of understanding of the swamp that they're in and the landmines that exist in the swamp, you have to have been inside the swamp in order to recognize a potential landmine and avoid it. And so if I were Flynn, if I were the national security advisor and I'm in that position, I don't make a phone call. Well, not even, this was before that. I'm the designee. I don't make a phone call without having my own transcript. So when the media, when the leak happens and they say they've got a transcript, which of course they never show, I've got my transcript to show. This is what we talked about. And I'm not going off my memory, so I forget to tell the vice president, this is absolutely unacceptable. But it's an indication of the lack of governing experience, the lack of being inside that swamp. And not a single one of them has that experience.
No.
Now, Sessions has that experience, having, been in the Senate, but Sessions is about to get mired in his own little mini swamp on the same issue of these contacts with Russia. And so then I would have to add, it's not just about having been in the swamp and having governance experience, it's about having stepped on a landmine in the swamp and understanding what kind of battle vestments you got to put on so that you don't get blown up or you don't lose a leg or an arm while you're mucking around in the swamp trying to find a plug so you can drain it.
It's brilliantly analysed, that, and then, of course, while that lack of governing experience is being exploited, he's also brought in, and we are going to run out of time quickly, so I want to move this on, but he's also brought in and surrounded himself with, his economic team is basically Goldman Sachs, isn't it? With one or two former Rothschild bankers in there as well, and these people will take advantage. There's no doubt about that.
Well, the way Robert Steele puts it, and I do agree with this, what he says, is that Trump is trying to govern from the 27% instead of the 73% that's available to him. He has utilized or revolutionized communication with a base by directly communicating with folks through Twitter. And now he's got a Facebook page. Well, he's got several Twitter accounts, and he's got a Facebook page. And so he in a way that, say, for example, me, I was not able to go around the media when they mischaracterized me. I had no place to go. I had no place else to go except the few alternative media that were truly alternative and not controlled opposition. But now he can go directly to tens of millions of people with one tweet. And so this completely nullifies or at least neutralizes the impact of that mainstream media. This is an incredible tool now he's showing us that the rest of us can utilize that if we can just get enough public traction in order to communicate directly as well.
Can I put an argument against that briefly? Let me just put one argument against that. I can't fault what you said, but where is the conversation then? So Donald can say, well, I said this and I did this, I'm going to sign this executive order and I'm going to do this. We don't have the facility to challenge him, to question him on what he said, right?
It's a one-way. You're absolutely right, but it's not a conversation. It's a monologue, and so therein lies the problem, and that's a structural problem that's been created by all of the lapses that have taken, the cumulative lapses that the people of the United States have allowed to take place in their polity. And so now we all are suffering for what didn't happen. We could go way back, but that didn't happen in 1963.
Yeah.
Didn't happen in 1968. So there were certain moments. Didn't happen in the year 2000 when the election was stolen. So we are where we are now. But you're absolutely right that it's a one-way conversation. And that's why it's so important that that team be expanded to reflect the 73% rather than the narrow 27%. It makes no sense strategically. It makes no sense politically for that small group of billionaires and people who are on this live in the same neighborhood. For them to even think that they can make policy for me and the people in my neighborhood and for my mama and for you know what I mean? And so therefore it absolutely makes no sense. It's doomed to fail if you're running a 27% gain when the promise and all you have to do is deliver on public policy to the 73%, and you change the political landscape in the United States. A tremendous opportunity is being squandered, and that is inexcusable.
Cynthia, we're going to leave it there for now, but don't hang up when we finish. I want to have a quick word with you. Folks, if you want to hear the program Cynthia made for KPFK Pacifica, they're on Cynthia's website, allthingscynthiamckinney.com. I recommend you go to allthingscynthiamckinney.com. It's a terrific website anyway, loads of news. They're regularly updated with articles by Cynthia, and the archives are there. I hope they come to their senses and they ask you to continue to do the program. I really do.
I hope they do so as well. And it's community radio at stake, and what a certain group, a little small group of people are trying to take the community out of community radio.
Right.
Thank you, Rick.
You're very welcome. Thanks for that. Very, very balanced kind of review of what's happened with Trump over the last couple of months. Certainly more balanced than most of what we've heard here. And thanks for introducing us to people like Robert Steele. Robert's been on the programme a couple of times in the last few months. I think he's back on again next week, and you put us in touch with him. Cynthia, always a pleasure. Thanks again for coming on. Dr. Cynthia McKinney. Look after yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, Cynthia McKinney joined me a bit earlier on, not live, of course. We're back in the room now. We're back in the room. And fascinating conversation that. Just to touch on something we talked about at the very beginning of it, we will, if in the event that Pacifica stands by its decision to take Cynthia's program off the air, if that's the way it goes, if that's the way it works out, the program she was presenting on KPFK, we will broadcast that program, because when we chatted afterwards, when we stopped recording, Cynthia was telling me how she was recording the program in her home, and I was absolutely monumentally impressed. I really was. Incredible how she's learned to use the software and got a grasp of editing. And I can't tell you how so many people find that very difficult, find it very, very tough. And yet she was packaging this program, which sounds lovely, that she was giving them once a week, doing it all by herself with no assistance. And if it doesn't work itself out, that dispute that the station has with her, we will put the program on every Tuesday. And we will put it on at the conclusion of this program every Tuesday for an hour. And I'd be delighted to be involved with that. I've known Cynthia for 10 years. And like we spoke about in that particular conversation, I wanted her to do something from the States when she was in the States at the time, something for TPV in London, and that would have happened were it not for the demise of TPV.